God, I forgot all my lines. I forgot everything I was going to talk about. I get nervous around you, Ed.
Oh, come on.
The tables are turned now. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah,
I've done a lot of these, and it's interesting having the tables turned. So
it's got to be interesting because I think that's the most interesting thing about doing these kind of chats. And I refuse to call them interviews because to me, it's like it's just basically a chat with bros, and like, and it's being taped. Sometimes people don't know about it. At least I've told you that this is happening, and then it just goes up and we talk about it. Because I think the most interesting thing about you and guys like me is we're really cut from the same cloth, as far as like being obsessed with rock and roll, being obsessed with music, like and you would admit as well, like really like on that extreme path of knowing way too much, retaining entirely too much information. But the interesting thing is that guys like me go, I'm going to get a guitar and I'm going to do this, and then for you, it's like this other path entirely. And then going on to become like the man of the people, this sort of like, like you charging with your sword and everybody's like, yeah, follow that guy. He knows what he's talking about. And I think it's really fascinating to have watched you grow. Like even before that metal show and all that stuff, you were still such a force. But then watching that thing really take it to the next level now has been really interesting. So it basically starts with, where does that come from? Like as a kid, what is the thing? Is it, I'm assuming you're like anybody else and you heard Sugar Sugar by the fucking Archies and whatever else like a kid, but something along the way made you go, that's the thing. Probably.
Yeah, it was really like, and it's funny too when you talk about how we're these rock super fans, and we all find each other too, don't we? I mean, it's even before like I knew you as a friend, and I've known you now probably 15 years, I think.
I know.
Say something like that.
Yeah.
But I would come to Vegas and people would be always like, you got to see this guy, Todd. You got to go meet this guy, Todd. And I was like, Todd? And they'd be like, yeah, you love Todd. You're just like Todd, like you're really into music and stuff. And then I met you and it's like, hey, I've known that guy forever, even though I just met you. So
yeah, exactly.
That, yeah. We find us super fans find each other of this music. But to answer your question, I was just, there was a couple like epiphany moments for me as far as rock music. And the first was really, I listened to, as a little kid, the Partridge Family and things like that, things I get on 45, TV music and things. And the big moment, two big moments for me was backseat of my parents' car. I would have been probably 9. And at that point I had only been listening, maybe 10. And at that point I was only listening to like this TV music and cartoon music. And AM radio comes on and a song comes on by a band called The Raspberries called Go All the Way.
Right.
And maybe the single most life-altering moment for me, that 3 minutes of that song, because I remember like it was yesterday, being in the back seat of the car, wherever we were going, AM radio playing, that song comes on. And anybody that knows that song knows it starts with a very crunchy, distorted guitar riff, and then segues into this very melodic, verse, and then jams back into the heavy guitar part.
Yeah.
And hearing that juxtaposition of like that great melody against like crunchy, distorted guitar and busy drums, even at 10, 11 years old, I was like, what is this? It was like a whole new world open to me. So I became in like 11, 12 years old, like a massive fan of this band, The Raspberries.
Wow.
And they were really my first favorite band. And I had my mom take me to the record store and get their records. And I remember even that was weird because the Raspberries were what were known as a singles band. Nobody bought their full albums. You bought their 45s. Right. But I insisted on the full record. I needed to learn about it, listen to it. And to this day, their 4 albums I absolutely love. So that was a huge moment. And then I was into that for a couple of years. And then I'm walking home from junior high school and a friend of mine says, let's go, I'm going to go buy a record. And every day on the way home from the school through my hometown, we would pass a record store in the town. And I said, all right, I'll take a walk in with you. What are you going to buy? And he said, I'm going to get a record by this band called Kiss. And I said, I've never heard of them. And he goes, oh, you got to check it out. It's pretty cool. So we go in the record store, he flips through the bins, he goes in the Kiss section, and he says to me, I'm buying this record. This is their new album. And that
Wow.
was Rock and Roll Over. So this is
Wow.
76.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And he goes, I don't know how this one is because it's brand new, but if you wanted to try them out, I'd say get the one before this, because that one I know is good because I have it. And I was like, that makes sense. So what's the one before it? Destroyer. So I buy Destroyer and I go home, drop the needle, Detroit Rock City, stare at the cover, game over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is
That's
a
it. I mean,
universal experience for so many of us, I know.
game over. I mean, the Raspberries, Todd, on the cover of one of their albums were wearing leisure suits.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Kiss was in leather, and and I'm like,
Fire
oh,
and yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So immediately was like, Raspberries. I mean, how could I
yeah.
ever like that? And I'm all in. And for probably 2 to 3 years, there was no other band. The first
Sure.
band that cracked in beyond that was Aerosmith. That would have been the next one that I let into that world. Because for the first couple of years, anything that wasn't Kiss, I viewed as a threat to Kiss,
Oh
and there
yeah.
couldn't be any threats to Kiss. So that's the thing. And then, I took some drum lessons for a little while, but I didn't stick with it. And I was like, well, I need to be in this, and I just
Right.
didn't feel like I was going to be a musician. So my next life mission was, as a kid, was like, okay, I love this music so much. How can I engage in it? How can I share it with other people? How can I get other people into it and tell other people about this stuff? And it started from there. It started writing the high school newspaper music column, working at a college radio station when I was in high school, starting a metal show at 18 years old out of high school, working in a record store, eventually a few years later working for a record company. So it was like this, how many chips can I accumulate to get experience, but also find ways to share and grow this music? So if I'm doing writing, okay, I'm writing articles about it. If I'm on
Right.
the radio, I'm playing it for people. I'm working in a record store, I'm physically selling it and recommending it to people. I'm working for a record company, I'm actually having the opportunity to sign bands. So it was just this whole cumulative thing about this quest and passion for the music. It was never about, oh, I want to become known or I want to become popular personally. It was just like, let me get as many platforms as I can to turn more people on to this music I love. And then along the way, being consistent and doing it for 38 years straight, eventually just become known for that consistency and what you do. And most people like it. And then you even become known for the things you don't like. But
Sure. Yeah.
it is, it all comes with the territory, and it's just been part of the whole incredible experience.
But it is an interesting thing that you bring up because there is no school to go to be an appreciator of music or rock and roll in that way. That it's kind of like the fact that it's sort of something you crafted on your own and just by complete your passion for it. I mean, it wasn't sort of like you weren't doing it for money, you weren't doing it for fame. It was because you loved the music. Even working at a record label was because you love the music. You wouldn't have signed bands or been involved with any music that you weren't really into. You know that. I know that.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I didn't make any money. I mean, I didn't move out of my parents' house till very late. I mean, I was not. I was working for a record company, and I was still doing radio on the weekends, and I was doing freelance writing, and I was still doing some work part time in a record store. I mean, I was all over the map, and I was hustling, and I was doing okay. But it was never like, I didn't really start to see any sort of like decent money until probably, well, when I moved from local radio in New Jersey into New York City, that was significantly more money. But still, when I see significantly more, like in New Jersey in radio, you'd make like maybe $8 an hour on the air. When
Okay.
you got to New York City, you'd get maybe $250 for a 4-hour shift.
Oh,
So
okay.
significantly more,
Yeah.
but not like, oh my God, I'm set for life money by any
Right.
stretch. And it was, but so yeah, it was never about that. But then once I started doing radio in New York City, it was a whole different thing. And then once I started doing TV, even that, starting out, not a lot of money, but then that money got better with each year that went by. And that was prior to that metal show. I was a host on VH1 Classic for
Yeah.
about 5 years, doing
Yeah.
every genre of music. So having my toe in that water was great. And then I built it from there. And then of course, as you get older and you get married and you've got a family and you've got people that are relying on you, you do obviously have to at that point be like, okay, I need to be paid properly because I'm an adult now. I've got bills, I've got a family,
responsibilities. Yeah.
So it does shift at some point where when you're younger, it's all about, I'll do everything. And then it comes to a point like, okay, well, what's the deal points? And it's just natural. It's not being greedy or selfish. It's just, you got to make a living. And that's really, a transition there. So it all worked out, but it's been a hell of a 2 years. It's going to be 40 years that I've been in this business. I mean, I started literally right out of high school, and it's just, it's crazy to think about because I just don't feel like it's been that long.
So did you feel like that the radio would be the focus, or was that just sort of like something that was kind of like you love doing it anyway? But when did that become like, okay, now this is the focus? Did that come when the New York thing presented itself, or had you already kind of like kind of committed to that being the thing?
I loved doing radio. I loved the immediacy of it. I loved that it was live. I loved that it was this immediate reaction format, and I really enjoyed it. But I did not think that it was ever going to be of all the things I've done,
right,
it's without a doubt the most consistent thing I've done, because I've literally done it since I've been 18 years old. And I currently do 8 broadcasts a week, 6 live on Sirius XM. So it's without a doubt the most dominant, consistent thing. But I never thought, I didn't set out to be in radio. I didn't think I was any great broadcaster. I didn't think I had a big radio voice. None of that. It was it was a platform to share my music and my experiences and hear other people's. And I was not, it's interesting. My radio story is that I was working in this record store as a kid, and the guy who managed the record store was way into radio, but not radio the way I was into it as a delivery system. He was into the art of radio, meaning like talking up a record right to the post, the big radio voice guys, the processing, all that top 40 mentality, which I had no interest in. But when I told him that I had a little interest in radio and I dabbled in it in high school, he had me come to his house in Staten Island, New York. I lived in New Jersey, and he said, come over on the weekend. I want to show you something. And I went to his house, and he had a pirate radio station in his basement.
Oh, wow.
And for people that don't know, a pirate radio station is basically an illegal transmitter. You have to be licensed in America to broadcast over the air. And he had this bootleg radio station.
Wow.
And he said to me, we go on the air here for a couple hours on the weekend, and we can only keep it on for a couple hours because we can't have them trace the signal because we could get arrested. But he goes, come over, we'll fire up the station and you can play some records. And I did. And of course, this is way before cell phones and all that. So we used to send a guy to the payphone on the corner. We'd give out that number as the request line. He'd answer it. He'd take the request and he'd call us and we'd play it. So it felt like it was a real station. People had no idea. I mean, it sounded totally pro.
Wow.
That's where I cut my teeth, and that's where I made my first demo. And then I took it to my local station in New Jersey that I grew up with, and they gave me this chance to do this thing called the Metal Show, because they used to come in the record store, and at that point, nobody even had really a metal show. So it was this domino thing, but the whole time I'm thinking to myself, this is just a hobby. I'm making a few extra bucks, but I'm having fun. I don't know what I'm going to do for a living. But when I moved because I was like most radio people, it was like, you got to go to Des Moines, and then you got to go to, Fargo, and then you got to go to Reno, and then you got to work your way up, and maybe you get to a top 10 market, and then maybe you land in New York or LA. That was never my mission. And I never did that. I'm like, I got a station in my backyard. Oh yeah, New York City's 30 miles away. Yeah, whatever. It didn't matter to me. I was on the radio. I didn't know markets. I didn't know anything like that.
Right.
But when I moved, when I had the opportunity to go on the air in New York City, versus New Jersey, which was my local station, suburban station, it completely changed because instead of broadcasting to a few counties in New Jersey, I'm now broadcasting to 3 states.
Yeah,
And again, this is long before streaming and the internet and all the delivery we have now.
of course.
And
Yeah.
also the money, instead of $50 a shift, it's $250 a shift.
Right.
So that's when it first came to me like, if I could do this a few more times a week and turn this into something, this is pretty good.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was around that time, which would have been around 94, where I kind of shifted gears away from the label stuff. I was doing some artist management, and really started to say, I'm going to chase the radio thing. And that's that. And then that led to TV, but the radio thing was always that was a big transitional moment.
I mean, it's really fascinating to hear because I think it's also the case of your, specific passion for a certain genre clearly was what defined you and what you did. So the fact that you actually were into this kind of music, it was sort of like the timing was perfect that someone said, we should have a hard rock hour or whatever, or heavy metal thing. And you were kind of like the obvious guy, like, get that Eddie kid, put him on the air.
No, but
No?
that's a very important difference. Nobody said that to me. I had to say that to them.
Oh, I see. So you sold them on the heavy metal idea or the hard rock.
Oh yeah. So
Okay.
what happened was I was working in this record store with this manager who helped me make this demo, and he was the owners of the local rock station in New Jersey, WDHA, which is still on the air. The folks that at that time that owned it no longer do, but the station's still there, and
Right.
it's still a rock station, thankfully. But they used to come into the record store because it was right across the street, and they would come in and shop there. And I
Right.
knew they owned the radio station, and I would always say to them, "Hey guys, this would have been '83."
Okay.
And I would be like, "Hey, we're selling all these heavy rock records, and I don't hear you playing them."
Right.
And they're
Yeah.
like, well, what are you talking about? Well, think about '83. You had Metallica, Kill 'Em All. You had Def Leppard, Pyromania before it broke.
Yeah.
You had Quiet Riot, Mental Health before
Sure.
it broke. And that stuff at that time wasn't being touched yet.
No.
And I said, look, we're selling a ton of it. You should have a show to play this. And they were like, well, I go, give me a couple hours on the weekend. And they're like, you're a kid. You don't even know radio. I'm like, here's my tape. And that was the tape I made at the fake radio station. And they took the tape and they listened to it and they're like, these call letters don't even exist. What is this? Don't worry about it. Put me on the air.
Don't worry about it. That's
And they did.
amazing.
I mean, they sniffed out that it was a dummy, like it was a pirate station, but the bottom line was it proved that I could at least speak coherently on a microphone, which is all it really was.
So did an audience kind of build pretty quickly for what you were doing? At least, as far as the heavy metal kids found your station, your show or whatever, or how'd that work?
Yeah. So that's a really, so there's a thing there too that happened. So I had pretty much zero radio experience, but they gave me the shot to do this thing. And, this is crazy. So my first ever shift on the radio, I am, needless to say, extremely nervous. It's the station I grew up listening to. I'm about to crack the microphone for the first time ever. And the woman that was on before me was told to look out for me, help me out, show me the ropes.
Okay.
Well, and again, it's really important to note the timeline here because this is '83. This is before computers. This is before automation. This is physically queuing up vinyl records live on the radio.
Wow.
This is before CDs. There's no CDs. There's nothing.
So
this is
like,
needle.
If it's track 3, you've got to be like, yeah. So it's not like just playing the first song of whatever. You've got to find the track and make sure it kind of lands on that or whatever. That sounds like a nightmare.
It's put the board in queue. It's find the song that you're supposed to be playing. Cue it, hear it, cue back half an inch for the time for the turntable to pick up. If your song is ending that's on the air right now and there's 10 seconds, you better be ready with that next record. Otherwise, you're getting dead air. It's not like today where music DJs can flip an autopilot button and walk out for half an hour and nobody would know it. Right. Or worse than that, I mean, what a lot of people don't know is about 75% of what they think is local rock radio. There's not even a human being in that station. It's all automated, and it's just like a mother brain. But that's a whole nother conversation. But back then it was, it was really like you had to be on it. Well, this woman got a phone call from her boyfriend, and she decided to take the call in the back lounge.
Oh no.
And her last record is ending, and she's like, "You got this, you're good, I got trust in you, I got to take this call." And I'm like shaking, right? So that's how it starts. And my shift starts, whatever it was, 10 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. Okay, I start with a couple records, and I'm running the sweepers, and okay, now I'm going to open the microphone for the first time ever. And I'm literally like handshaking going to the console, and push mic on, light goes on, music goes out, light goes on. Hey, it's Eddie Trunk, and this is WDHA, the Rock of New Jersey, and here's Def Leppard, Blink, whatever I did.
Right, yeah.
And hit the record, and the record starts, and I walk back from the mic, and I'm like, holy shit, I did it. Like, I actually did it. Like, and I was all proud of myself because I didn't stammer. I thought I did it okay. About 10 seconds later, the hotline flashes.
Okay.
The dreaded inside hotline program director number light flashes.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, maybe he's calling to say, hey, congrats, or answer the phone. He goes, what'd you just do? And I go, I just did the first break. I mean, did it sound okay? Was it okay? He goes, whatever you did, there was nothing but about 20 seconds of silence.
Oh no.
And I'm like, no, I talked in the microphone. I was there. He goes, where's Jill? That was the girl's name. Where's Jill? I go, well, she's in the back talking to someone. And he's talking to me. He goes, what did you do? What button did you push? I told him, I was like, mic 1 right here. He goes, you idiot. Mic 1 is the interview position mic on the other side of the console. So I turned on the interview mic on the other side of the board, not my mic, which is regular mic, not mic 1. So nobody heard it because the mic wasn't on that I thought I turned on.
Oh my God.
No, I thought I was done. I thought it was like, I'm never to see radio again. But the program director was like, he gave me a pass, worked through it, and I started doing this show for a while, and it quickly became popular because there was nothing like it.
Yeah, I bet.
And then about 6 months in, there was a part-time employee at the radio station who was upset because she was promised the next shift should one open on the air. And this was perceived as an open shift that she didn't get.
Oh, wow.
So the program director came to me and said, look, I've got to change out the host on the show. I'm putting this other person in, but we still want you to be there and kind of be a part of it.
Oh, wow.
And that was that was the first of obviously many blows that toughens you in this business.
Sure.
And
yeah.
I bit down hard, and I'm like, I can be a jerk and just walk out of here and maybe never see a radio studio again, or I can just try to make this work and see what happens. So for like 2 years, I was like behind the scenes helping pick the music, and every once in a while having some banter on the air. But it was very, very difficult to deal with that. And then because it was my baby. And then after about a year of that went by, he called me because, in all honesty, this person did not know the music. It wasn't about that. It was just about the shift.
Yeah.
And he said to me, we're going to put you back in there. And then that led to me doing some other shifts during the week and actually becoming, way more accustomed to doing radio and becoming a DJ. But it was really difficult because my whole reason for being a DJ was to play what I wanted to play. And it was eye-opening when I found out that even at that time, outside of my little show on the weekend, if I was on during the day and they called me to do a fill-in, I had to do the format. I had to follow the playlist.
Of course.
And that was just something I wasn't comfortable doing because the whole reason I wanted to do radio was to share my stuff. And that
Right.
was like
Yeah.
the last time although I've done that on and off, where I've done the format, so to speak,
Yeah.
for me, it was, I made a decision early on. It's like, I've got to be able to have creative control. And that's probably the single most important decision I made, because it made me become known for something.
Absolutely, yeah. Because I can't imagine you. I don't. I can't imagine what's going on at that time. Here's the Thompson Twins, or whatever music was going on at that time. So '83. Are we talking like new wave of British heavy metal, like that whole thing? Because that's such an early wave of the Ozzy solo album. What I mean, like before, and you're talking like before the LA hair metal thing really took off. So Van Halen is around, and all those other records you just mentioned, but that is sort of the beginning of a very big ball that rolls on for a long time. So your show is happening, and with it, as the sort of like the hair metal thing, as they tend to call it these days, once that rolled in, it must have just kind of been like, it must have just been a huge rocket for you to grab hold of at that point.
Yeah, well, one of the first interviews I ever did was with Wasp for the first record.
Wow.
So, that's again, I could talk for hours, but that's a whole nother insane story.
Right?
Blackie and Chris came in on the first record. Just nuts. Motley was
right.
was happening. Shout at the Devil was happening then.
Okay, wow.
That was big. Ozzy, Bark at the Moon, Diary period was going on. Like you said, then you had this whole new scene coming in with Metallica, Kill 'Em All, and that was a really pivotal record for me. Even though I didn't really quite process it originally, that's a story in and of itself, because me playing Metallica, I was one of the first to play Metallica. That led to me getting a job working for Megaforce Records 3 years later.
Of course,
directly connected to me taking a chance on playing them, because the guy who signed them, Johnny Z, said to me, if you give me a chance and play this, if I can ever get this to happen, I'm going to hire you. So there's a million stories that intertwine. But yes, that Def Leppard coming off a High and Dry into Pyromania, Quiet Riot, Metal Health just came out and then just blew up with Come On Feel the Noise. So that's all what was happening at that time.
So what about all the Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and all that stuff? Is that part of the same? It's got to be part of the same thing then.
Oh yeah, Priest, Maiden, and what I did, Todd, and what I still do to this day, like, there were a lot of lines drawn then, where it was like you were a thrash guy, or you were a hard rock guy, or you were a pop metal guy, or you whatever. And I never. There's things like, I don't like the real extreme stuff, and I don't like some of the more modern stuff. But I always mixed like I was the guy that always did and still does and has no problem playing Poison and Slayer in the same show.
Yeah, I know.
It just didn't, like, it was, so I was cool when like Megadeth and Metallica and Anthrax and Slayer and Testament, that was all in my mix. So was LA Guns, so was Bullet Boys, so was Poison. It was just, if it was all good, loud rock, I was cool with it.
But a lot of it goes back to the Raspberries, doesn't it? Like kind of like I know you and I both kind of can flirt in that world of extreme, Metallica. We all love Metallica, Anthrax, the Big Four, that whole thing. But then there was a lot of that stuff that couldn't help but go back to that Raspberries Cheap Trick. Like you're hearing crunchy guitars, but a very catchy melody and some harmonies in there. And that's still part of my DNA to this day. Like it's still like the thing that I kind of gravitate towards every time I hear it. You know what I mean? And to be honest, some of those thrash bands had a pretty good handle on hooks as well. You know what I mean? Like they weren't just like making racket to make racket. They were writing really good songs.
Well, the gateway thing for me, where I finally embraced thrash, a lot of people say to me when I tell them I was one of the first people to play Kill 'Em All, a lot of people were like, well, what'd you think? Did you like, oh, you heard the future? And I'm like, honestly, I wish I could say that, but no, I didn't know what to make of it. And I'm a big fan of vocals, and some of that stuff was rough for me to get into because the vocals weren't there and I couldn't find the melody in it. It wasn't until I heard the song Armed and Dangerous by Anthrax that I heard Joey Belladonna singing Steve Perry-like vocals over thrash. And that's when I was like, okay, now we're talking. Right. That was a big, big swing for me to ease me into that more, at the time, extreme music. But at my core, and it's funny, a lot of times people today still think of me as like a metal guy and all that. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But by today's standards of music, I would consider myself way more accurately. I would describe myself as a hard rock fan
Oh
because
yeah,
music has gotten way more aggressive,
of
and the
course.
more extreme stuff with the screamo vocals, it's just not for me. I mean, I appreciate people that like it, and I respect it, and I respect the bands that do it. But I need singing and I need melody. Otherwise, So even back then, I mean, one of my first earliest shows, I saw Cheap Trick and UFO together, and
Yeah,
just, I mean, it's amazing. Billy Squire. I never talk about Billy Squire enough. I
I was
was
just going to
such
bring
a
him
Billy
up
Squire
because
fan,
yeah. Oh,
such a
absolutely.
Billy Squire
Yeah.
fan. So, I loved all those records and all that stuff too.
It's fascinating because you're absolutely right. Because we can talk, and we have talked. We've closed down many restaurants and bars, and you'd think it's closing down a bar, partying. No, we're just talking about
Yeah,
Billy Squire or something. But no, we've had many conversations, in-depth conversations about a variety of artists and a variety of bands, and not always is it a hard rock band, because guys like Billy Squire or any of that, the Babies, or any of those groups that were doing really cool music back then, we loved. Cheap Trick is again, I always keep going back to them because it's a weird kind of marriage of like hard rock, and a lot of hard rock fans still love Cheap Trick, even though there's a very poppy edge to those guys that would be almost unforgivable to guys like Scott, Ian, and those guys, but they love Cheap Trick, and we all know that. And I think that,
yeah. Cheap Trick
yeah,
crosses all boundaries. I mean, people, whatever you're into, even the heavy guys, like you said, like the Anthraxes of the world. I think Anthrax has covered like three Cheap Trick
absolutely.
songs. I mean, everybody loves Cheap Trick. They're that perfect amalgamation of crunchy edge, but incredible vocal and melody.
And songwriting. It's all,
Great
about
songs.
songwriting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but it's really interesting to hear that, like you said, it's really that passion of just kind of chasing something down without necessarily a plan. I'm assuming at some point there might have been like that, voice in your ear about, going to college and getting an engineering degree or something, whatever your parents were concerned about. What was it like as a kid? I mean, growing up in Jersey, you know, to me, it always sounds so romantic. No matter what you're talking about to a kid from Canada, you're going, Jersey, like was Bruce Springsteen your neighbor? Was John Bon Jovi at the grocery store when you got bread? I mean, like, and I know it's nothing like that when you explain it to me, but it seems like when you're from a place that is steeped in history like that, it feels like it should just be like magic land. But I know Jersey's Jersey. So what was it like?
Yeah, well, it's like anything. I mean, where I'm at talking to you from right now is I have a small house at the beach at the Jersey Shore where I grew up coming here my whole life as a kid. And
Yeah,
about 5 years ago, I bought this place, and it's been amazing because when I come here, I mean, I'm here right now by myself just to get away for a day or two, and and just get some work done. And it's amazing because when I come here, so many memories flood back to me. Like couple blocks over, when I was like the littlest of kids, my grandmother had a house, and the
wow.
beach is like 2 blocks that way, and a few blocks that way is the boardwalk where, sure, the rides and games are there, but that is a really, really important place in my musical upbringing, because when I was a kid, there were these stands on the boardwalk, and you would put a quarter on a number, and if it came up, you could pick any record you wanted, and if you
So
won
cool.
on the wheel. And you couldn't listen to the records before you bought them, so you could only judge and get a record off of what the cover looked like.
Yeah.
So I got turned on to so much music that way, though, because my mom would give me a handful of quarters and say, go play the wheel, and if I hit, I would pick a record and have a new record. It was a great way to discover music. So I
Totally.
got Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell that way.
Ooh,
I
good
got
one.
AC/DC, Highway to Hell that way.
Also a good
And there
one.
were a few I got that didn't pan out for me, but it was like, it was. So when I like just before we did this, I went up there and got some food, and I was just walking around, and I can't help but to walk that boardwalk and have all of those memories of being a kid. And the stands are still there, but they're not doing records. Although now
Right.
with vinyl, they could probably do it again.
Probably,
But
yeah.
there was bars. I remember there was a bar on the boardwalk called the Chatterbox. This is in Seaside Heights, New Jersey. And I would just stand outside of that bar, and they would always have, I remember, Sticky Fingers, the Rolling Stones tribute, and things like that.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
Twisted Sister, before anyone knew who Twisted Sister was.
Yeah.
All these Jersey bands. And I would I was too young to get in, but I would literally stand outside of the door where the guy would check the IDs just a few feet away. And I'd just listen, and I'd stand against the wall and I'd watch the people go in. And I was like, wow, how cool to be able to go in. And it was never like, I was never a big drink guy. I mean, to this day, I'm indifferent about alcohol. I never did a drug. It was just that I need to be in there. I need to be in that scene and in that music. So that part of New Jersey, the shore, the beach area, is extremely important to me. And that is this, where I'm sitting is literally Springsteen, Bon Jovi, Skid Row, like all like right around here is where it all happened. I just drove by the music store where Snake and Rachel worked at, and where they met and formed Skid Row. And Zakk Wylde used to go in at those days under his real name, Jeff Wyland, and buy guitars and give music and all these great memories around here. But I actually grew up about an hour and a half, where I still live now, an hour and a half north of here. Okay. And typical suburban area, but there you've got New York City about a 45-minute car ride away. Great. So in the shadows of New York City, but very, very much middle-class suburban. My mom and dad were pretty supportive and tolerant of my love of music. They liked music themselves. Right. But they were concerned because I didn't have a backup plan. And they always said you should have a backup plan. And I was not good in school at all. And it wasn't because I was dumb. It was just because I didn't have any interest. I was so consumed with music that nothing else really mattered. And I eked through high school. And when I got out of high school, my parents said to me, look, if you want to go to college, we'd suggest the local community college, which actually is really good, the one by me. Sure. And they said, well, you go, and if you stick with it and you like it and it turns into something, we'll help you out. If you don't go and you pull no shows and you're not into it, then we're out and you do what you want. Right. I went maybe 6 months. Oh, okay. Started blowing off classes, just not into it at all. There was a radio station there, but it only broadcast to the cafeteria, literally. Right. And I'm just like, this is not me. And then I got the job working at a record store. Right. Which at that point is just like, I might as well have been Bill Gates running Microsoft. Like, this is my life, Absolutely, I'm in heaven. Yeah, of course. And that was it. I never turned back. I just never. And I still feel that way about school. I have kids that are 17 and 13 now, and I've talked to my daughter about it, who's going to be a senior in high school. And I said, look, I'm not anti-college, but I'm also not of the belief of, you got to go or you can't make anything of your life. No. I think if you have a defined purpose to go and get an education for, great. But I know way too many people, and I have way too many friends whose kids went to college, pissed away a ton of money in debt forever, and it wasn't something they wanted to really do. So I don't encourage it or discourage it. I think it's a personal thing, and it really comes down to where you're at and what you want to do. Well, it's interesting that you bring up that whole thing about school, because when I hear you talk about it, it just sounds so familiar, because it was like, I remember my mom saying to me, well, if only you could apply your knowledge, because they would always be astounded by what I knew about something that just seems so unimportant to them. This record came out then, that was the producer of it, this guy, they recorded it here, because you're the same way. You must carry that around like a cross now whenever somebody sees you and goes, who was the bass player in Deep Purple on this record? And you're like, Glenn Hughes, or whatever. But it's astounding watching you do it, but I know there's a lot of us out there going like, well, I knew that too. It's like Eddie gets all the credit, but we knew that too. But no, you do have an astounding amount of information up there in your head. And if only they had been teaching those classes in high school, we would be like, valedictorians. It's a given. But I couldn't find same thing. I could not find the interest in what was being taught, because I was so interested in music and all that kind of stuff, and knowing crazy amounts of things. The other thing I wanted to bring up was what I think is really interesting is guys like you and me at our age, when we would have found a band, say it was the Raspberries,
and like when you say you found Kiss in 76, there's that cool moment like where you go, there's like 6 albums by this band. You know what I mean? Like you weren't just finding a band on their first album, which is always exciting too. But there's like the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Kiss, the Who, Led Zeppelin. You would go back and go like, you would hopefully buy one of the records and go, this is great. I'm really enjoying this. There's like 10 more of this band, and it would just be this kind of like, I envy young kids now because there's a wealth of this stuff to go through if they decide to pull at that thread, whether it's Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones or whatever. So it's really exciting to me to hear you say that, because it's like, I remember that you'd be like, this is really great, dude, there's like a whole bunch more. And you'd go down to the record store and go like, oh my God. And you got to figure out how you're going to pay for all these,
Yeah. When I got Destroyer, immediately I went back the next day and got Rock and Roll Over, which was the new record. And then each time I had some money or my parents would let me get a record, I remember the next thing I got was the Originals, which was the first 3 records in one package.
That's great.
And then Alive. So that was very much a thing. Like, let me get caught up on everything now if I'm into this band. Raspberries have Go All the Way. Wait, they've got 2 other records. I must have them.
Yeah.
And not only must I have them, I must read every liner note and every credit and smell it and touch it and hold it. That's the part that I think sucks for kids today, Todd, is that part of it.
Yeah.
Like, sure, it's great that everything's at your fingertips, but the experience of that excitement of holding it and what it meant to you. Again, I think it's wonderful that some of the physical formats are back. I'm personally not on the vinyl kick. I'm still a CD guy.
Yeah, I know that about you. Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, I have no issue. I think it's great that people are into vinyl, because I just think anybody that can still have a physical connection to music, it means so much more than just, oh, this came out today, let me click, 30 seconds, no good, put it down. I think 100%. that I know what I know because of all my cumulative experience, but also because I didn't just listen to those records. I read the thank yous. I read who mixed it, who mastered it, who wrote it. And that to this day, that's still really important to me. I get a CD and I go right through the booklet and I'm like, oh, okay, Bob Ludwig did the mastering, and this, it's like,
all those familiar names, them all. So Martin Birch produced this. What else did he produce? You go back and find like all this other stuff that these producers had produced, and you go, this is good too. Yeah, it's such
and I don't care about anything else. That's the problem. That's why the school thing. Like, if I applied myself like that to history or math, but it wasn't. It was like all of that was just like, get me out of here.
I know.
So I can go music crazy.
I know. It's such a crazy thing, because now that when you're talking about all these people, what I really find interesting now is like all of them, everybody we've brought up and we've talked about musically are all now, associates of yours, colleagues, friends, you know what I mean? Like everybody we've talked about, because you're such a champion of the music and a champion of the thing, that you've become a voice that carries some credibility when it comes to like, you should check out this record. People go, well, Ed says to check out this record, it must be pretty good, so that's gotta, when did that start to really shift in your brain, when you were like, wow, I know these people? Like, I know you were working with Ace back, like way back. So when that kind of stuff started to happen, and like now, now when I'm saying, we'll be talking, we're sitting together having lunch, hang on, I got to return this text from Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick. And I'm like, what world do we live in that these are like guys that we know, like literally guys that we were children listening to their records with big headphones on and obsessing about them. And now you literally take calls from Rick Nielsen or, take your pick of these guys that we grew up on. When did that become normal? Like, when did that start to kind of unfold? When Wasp?
If I take a step back from it, and when I hear you just saying that, it's still not normal.
To me, it's not normal either. Like, we're rehearsing with Slash and the guys, and Cheap Trick's rehearsing next door, and that right there sounds crazy to me. I'm like, what? That's like saying, Superman and Batman are just hanging out next door. When they come over and they in a group of them, and you're like, and I can still remember cutting out a piece of cardboard to look like Tom Peterson's bass on the cover of Budokan, and that kind of stuff. And like, so it never gets normal for me, but it does become kind of like, it's never not awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't take it for granted, but you also, and look, you're in the same boat. You're a professional. You're in a band with an iconic guy in Slash, and a guy we both know obviously very well, who's also the great thing about that is he's also a really good guy and a very grounded guy, and doesn't act like, you know,
No,
the icon that he is, which is really refreshing and cool. But the
absolutely.
thing is that you know, I just like, I guess like sometimes when you're in the flow of your day and your week and your month and your life, it all comes in stride. And then there's the times where you take a step back, which I probably don't do enough, and be like, yeah, it's like this is pretty crazy that
I know. Yeah,
this
yeah.
super fan guy has been able to do this. But I think that it comes from consistency, because I've done it for so long, and they kind of figured, well, he hasn't gone away yet. He's probably not going to go away.
Yeah.
It comes from a place of passion.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why I have the audience I have and why people care about what I do or say is not only the platforms I have and the decades I've done it, but also the fact that, if I'm being totally honest, that people know that I'm willing to say if I don't like something.
That's true. Yeah,
And
you
that's you got to take the good with the bad. So for the 90% of the rock world that likes me and respects me and appreciates that about me,
yeah.
and understands that that's my job and they do what they do, there is going to be 5 or 10% that are going to dislike you for it. And their fan bases of the super fan base of their fan base will also dislike you for it and say a lot of times very baseless stuff, because they're just such, they view you as like, we're in a world, I think what I'm trying to say is we're in a world now where everything is so PC, everything is so cookie cutter, everybody is so sensitive, and everybody's used to being told everything they like exactly off of the bio and the one sheet the way it's supposed to be asked.
Right.
That when you deviate from that or have an opinion or ask a tough question or say to somebody, I really didn't like this, it's almost like, whoa.
Sure.
But that gets you, and I've never done that for shock effect or anything. I just view myself a fan, and that's how I talk. But that for whatever little backlash you might get from that, whether it be from the artist or from a certain percentage of the fan base, that's actually what gets you in the long run respect and credibility, because people know you're real. And I'll never forget, about 10 years ago, Sammy Hagar called me up. There it is again. I mean, that sounds name dropping.
I know. Yeah.
It's just it's that what we just talked about.
And you're like,
I mean,
what? Like rock
but
candy?
He's actually a friend. I mean, I mean, I've known him forever. I love the guy.
Of course,
he called me up like 10 years ago, and he's like, I got this record coming out. I want to send it to you. I said, sure. He goes, I want you to tell me what you think of it. And I said, okay. He goes, the reason I'm calling you and sending it to you to tell me what you think of it is because you're the one guy I know who will actually tell me the truth.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
And that really resonated with me, because I'm like, here's a guy that gets it. Here's a guy that doesn't just want smoke blown up his ass, and he actually wants the truth, and he's not going to hold it against me.
Right.
And a lot of those guys are that are like that. I have so much respect for the guys in Def Leppard. Totally know what it is to be fans still. Like I've said so many times, like, first 2 records, guys, that's what it's about for me.
Yeah, I
mean, they laugh about it.
Yeah,
you know, we joke about it all the time. Like, would you go make another hit and run again? Will you please?
Oh man, yeah, that's my favorite too. Yeah,
they're great like that. Like Lars, I'll never forget when Death Magnetic came out. I love the record, but I thought that the production was horrible. I thought it sounded like crap, and I said it, and I said it on the air, and I said it on TV, and instead of Lars, who's just, again, a fan and gets it and a great guy, instead of him being like, well, he's the enemy, you can't talk to him.
Right.
He invited me to the show, and we had a great conversation about it.
Right.
And so I have so much respect for people like that are like that. But, you take the good with the bad, but I don't ever take it lightly. And I think the other reason why I have these relationships too is because I'll never breach a trust or a confidence, meaning if you or Slash or Ace Frehley or Sammy Hagar or Lars or anyone, if we're hanging out or we're somewhere or somebody calls me or texts me and say, dude, that's off the record. You've done it. We've had conversation. You'd be like, this isn't public yet. I would never breach that confidence. I would never go public with that. So I think there's a trust there too. People know I'm not fanboy. I'm not going to give you out anyone's contact unless I check with them.
Yeah, of course.
I know the protocol. I know how to roll. And, whether, people have said to me all the time, like, oh my God, your phone, you must have so many people. It's like, yeah, okay. I could text Dave Grohl right now, but I'm not going to put it on social media that I'm doing it.
Right? Yeah.
So you become professional, but it doesn't mean that you're not still a fan of these people.
Of course,
you still, you still are a fan, but you know how to handle it as you get older. And it's fine to be fanboy. You just don't want to do it outwardly to the artist because it makes most of them uncomfortable.
Of course it does. Yeah, I think we all have to learn that. Like, when Alice Cooper walks in the room, it's like, there's a part of you that's like, 11 going, that's Alice Cooper, and then the rest of you is like, hey, Alice, how's it going? It gets normal. Yeah.
But the thing about Alice, real quick, that is so, to use him as an example is funny, is, as you know, Alice is literally like the nicest, most unassuming man on the planet.
100%.
So even though it is Alice Cooper, it's a hard process.
I know.
Because it's like, but he's just literally like the guy that just sold me the pretzel out front of the show. He's like the most regular guy. So even though indeed he is Alice Cooper, he's just a dude when you're in his dressing room, and then he becomes Alice Cooper.
I think that's probably the key, is that he's not that Alice Cooper when you're talking to him. He's like the nicest guy in the world. Yeah.
Well, I took my kid to see Alice Cooper real quick.
Go ahead.
And my son was very young at the time, but Alice Cooper played a theater very close to my house. So I'm like, we're gonna go see Alice. So I took my wife and my son, who was really young at the time, and went to the show. And there's Alice doing the whole bit, the snake, the guillotine, the whole thing. And my kid's like, and then I go, somebody came out and said, Alice wants to say hi. And they came and got me, and they walked me right into his dressing room. And my kid's like, we're gonna go see that guy with the head chopped off. And then he comes in, and there's like, Uncle Alice, like, hey, have a harmonica. Let me sign it for you, kid. And it's like there, it was like, oh my God, my kid was like, wait a minute, you're the guy. It was like, it was wild, but Alice is the best.
He's the method actor of method actors, really. Like, he just clicks that switch and he's that guy. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. But I think that the most fascinating thing when I talk to you is always the fact that you managed to take this, like, if you were a bricklayer or working in engineering, you'd still be the same guy. You would just happen to be like standing outside of the record shop or the club or whatever, like we did as kids in the high school parking lot, having these same conversations. Because when you say something negative about a record or about an artist or whatever, they used to be better when they had this guy in the band, or that band's, I like the old guitar player, or whatever it is that you happen to be talking about. It's the same conversations we were having as kids talking about any number of bands. It's just sort of like, it's just very honest rock guy talk, but you found a way to turn it into a career, which I think is the most amazing part of it. And to see you succeed at it is like, wow. Maybe I took the wrong path. I should have just been like hanging out with you.
Well, you're doing just fine, man.
I'm doing okay. Yeah. I'm doing all right.
It's been wild. I'm grateful. I don't take it for granted. I put a ton of work. Again, man, I could tell you stories for days that would blow people's minds of the things that I heard and I endured. And you got to have a thick skin, and you got to roll with it. Even today, after all these years, I'm probably more known than ever just from a cumulative effect of things. And in this world today where we're in with internet and social media, I'll have people tell me like, hey man, did you see the comments on this or that? And I'm like, don't see them, don't know. I focus, I go forward. Look, by and large, the vast majority is very positive and kind and wonderful, but I don't get caught up in that. I tell people all the time, in 38 years, I've heard it all.
Of course.
I've seen it all, and it's nothing bothers me. I have tunnel vision. I do what I do. I'm worried about the next thing. I really should, but I don't really stop and smell the roses like I should. I'm too focused on what's next. My mind's always going. I can
Yeah.
never go to sleep because I can't shut it off. And that's just how it is. The only time I've really had those beats where I've taken it in was my 25th year of doing FM radio. There was a private party, and Judas Priest played a private show for me.
That's right. That's right. I remember that. That was nuts.
And the 30th year of that radio show was a big party at the same place, the Hard Rock in Times Square, also private. And many bands played that night. But the big moment was Ace and Peter played together.
That's so cool.
To this day, that's the last time they've ever played together. So to think about that, like having go full circle to be in the Kiss fan, and then here's Ace and Peter coming together for me to play at a party to celebrate me. That's the stuff like you're like, what's going on here? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think no one would appreciate that more than you. I think that's what I like the most about it is it's like, who should that be for? It should be for you. I mean, it's really, I think it's exciting. I think that's awesome. Well,
I had a guy, I did a thing on my radio show the other day where I did Diary of a Madman versus
I saw
Wizard
that.
of Oz.
I didn't listen, but I saw you talking about that.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that is a long conversation. Honestly, those are the best Aussie records, period. And it's really difficult for me to put those against each other. But go ahead, tell me.
Well, but no, the point tying into what you said, this is how I'm just always just thinking, and I don't stop and be like, wow, it was cool that I could do that. I said on the air, I said, wow, it'd be really cool to get Max Norman's perspective on this.
Yeah.
The guy who produced the records.
Of course, yeah.
And I go, you know what I'm saying to the audience on the air, I go, we're going to go to commercial break. I'm going to text Max Norman and I'm going to see if I can get him to chime in on this. I texted Max, got right back to me, came in out of the break. I'm like, guys, look what I got for you, Max Norman.
Wow.
Did 10 minutes with Max. He gave his thoughts. And I went on the air and I'm like, after that, I was like, man, that's the coolest thing that was able to happen. And that Max was willing to do that. And I swear to you, the next call I took, the caller said to me, Ed, you talked about that was so cool that Max did that. But no, you got to understand, that's what you can do that no one else can do.
Yeah.
That's what makes you, you. And I'm not saying that just to blow my own horn right now. I'm saying it because that's one of those times where I took a step back for half a second. Like, yeah, I guess it is cool. Like, most people don't know who Max Norman is in the mainstream world, but we do as rock fans.
Of course.
And the fact that I can facilitate those things, or the fact that, like, when Portnoy and Sheehan were trying to put a band together, I was like, hey, I got a guy, his name is Richie Kotzen. Let me get, that stuff makes me very happy. It's just being a fan and also being able to help and facilitate things, whether it's for the audience or for other friends who are musicians. I've done that for you. I mean, people have hit me up and said, hey, can you do me a favor for this or that? So that stuff to me is really important to me. I really enjoy helping out the community too.
Absolutely. And it's a great community. And like you say, it's like so many moving parts, so many people that that I know, that we kind of all find a way to, and that's what I'm saying. I know you're going to be spending a lot more time in Las Vegas, so we'll be closing down a lot more restaurants talking about basically this.
Well, what we got to do is, so yeah, for people that don't know what Todd's referencing is, I bought a place there and I'm not going to have it till the end of June, but once I'm there, and I'm not going to be there full time. By the way, there's a ton of people that have been emailing me like, dude, when are you moving? I'm like, I'm not moving. I'm just, eventually I'd like to, but it's going to be part-time.
Yeah.
But I love that city, as you know, and I've always dreamed of having a place, pulled the trigger on it. I'm going to be there part-time, late June forward, here and there. And I'm going to be when I'm there, I'm going to be doing my show from there. And you've come on with Fitz and we've had all these great conversations. So we're going to be able to do that face to face. I mean,
that'd be great.
My place is going to be like, Sirius XM Vegas, man.
Awesome.
We're going to have like all the rock guys in Vegas. I want to just hang and have these like, I'll be like Hugh Hefner in a smoking jacket.
Yeah, except there's no girls.
It's Vegas. I'm sure. I heard the strip clubs are reopening. So.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Oh no, I can't wait. It's gonna be a blast. But so what do you got coming up? You I don't know if you can talk about anything, but as the world is quietly opening up, I'm starting to have friends go, their calendars are starting to have stuff. I don't want to keep you much longer, so let's talk about the
No, it's
future.
all good, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, some, just like the last year for me
Did
during
it
the
make
whole
much
COVID
difference for
thing.
you? Did it make much difference for you, like that it I mean, in your world as a radio personality, does it you could still do your job, right?
Well, yeah, the radio show was unaffected because I had always worked from a home studio.
Right.
So while the world was scrambling to set up home studios, I had it already because I didn't want to I didn't want to drive into New York City every day from New Jersey. So
No.
I was always working from home. So on the radio front, there was a few months where it was difficult and I couldn't do live shows, but that all got sorted out, and that fortunately held without issue and continues. The thing where I took a hit, like everybody, is I do a lot of work on the road.
Yeah.
I'm really fortunate that because of the career I built, I get a lot of offers to host shows and do appearances
Yeah.
with all sorts of bands all over the place, and
Hmm.
festivals, clubs, theaters, whatever.
Cruises.
And yeah, cruises,
Yeah.
tons of
Yeah. Yeah.
cruises, Monsters of Rock. So that all went away, obviously. Just like if the gigs aren't there, they don't need me. Good
Exactly.
news is that feels like it's really starting to come back. This weekend, I'm going to be the first stuff I'm doing. I'm going to be with Frank Cannon. We're doing stuff in Oklahoma and in Dallas, and then from there, I got something in Houston. I've got something in outside of Sacramento. Got something in North Dakota.
Great.
So there's some really touring. I think is going to be a challenge still for a while, but there's a lot of bands doing the weekend fly-in stuff
Yep.
in places they can play,
Yep.
and phone's starting to ring again. So that's been really good. They announced the next Monsters of Rock cruise for next year, so that feels good that that's coming back.
Yeah.
So it's all been good. But for me, I really feel for guys like you and the bands that have to tour, and that's what you do, because
Yeah.
obviously that's been a big challenge. For me, that stuff is bonus stuff.
Right.
The
Right.
radio is my anchor, so I
Right.
have nothing to complain about. The anchor held, but having the other stuff starting to come back has been great.
And it's probably going to come hot and heavy, I would assume. I mean, I've been sort of entertaining the idea that the traffic jam of new music that's coming because everybody's recording, everybody's writing because they can't do anything else. And then once everybody's on the road, it's just going to be like 5 bands in town every night that you want to go check out. Hopefully, but I think everybody's going to be pretty hungry and pretty ready to go see some live music. So it'll be good for all
I
of us.
said on the air the other day, it's like when you're driving by a busy airport and you see all the planes lined up waiting to come in. That's kind of like
Yeah.
bands' buses. They're just
Yeah.
waiting to go out. As soon as there's the green
Yeah.
light, they're just good. So I tell my audience all the time, you've been missing music for like live music for the last year or so. When the floodgates open, you're going to be calling complaining that you got 5 shows a night and you don't know what to go to,
Yeah, I
because
know.
everyone's going to go.
You're like, who do I go see? I mean, it's going to be a good problem to have, but it also brings up an interesting point because I think we've all made the mistake of, after Eddie Van Halen passed, it was sort of like it awoke this thing in me that I really want to make sure people take that into account, because as Prince or Bowie or take your pick, as those guys are rolling through town, you never really think to yourself, is this the last time I'm going to be able to see this person? You know what I mean? Like, and a lot of our heroes aren't getting any younger. So it's, I don't mean to be like the harbinger of doom, but there is a sense of, like the McCartneys and the Jaggers and these guys are, they're it's a very rare time to watch Fleetwood Mac or any of the Eagles, any of these groups. They're becoming senior citizen age, and we're watching the first generation of rock and roll kind of get, or maybe not the first generation, but really kind of watching rock and roll kind of get old. You know what I mean? So but like you say, it's like I'm hoping that we can take that into account when bands are back on the road, because none of us take it for granted now, because it's like we actually lost this for, like you say, 16 months so far, and who knows how much longer. But it's quietly coming back, and I'm waiting for the phone to ring, and I'm ready.
And you're right. What your point's well taken. I think about it all the time with the older guys. I mean, I'm a
Neil
huge
Peart,
UFO
you know what I
fan.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a
We
huge
just lost
UFO
we
fan.
just lost Pete Way. Yeah.
3 guys from that band: Pete, Paul Raymond, Paul Chapman, all in the last year and a half.
That's right.
Uh,
That's right. Yeah.
there's just I think I came out to Vegas for the Aerosmith residency. I went to 2 shows. I said to my wife the other day, I'm like, if that residency comes back, and especially now having a place there, I'm going to be there every night, because how much more can there be? You know,
I
you
know.
want to soak it all in, and that band's still so good.
I
So
know.
you do cherish that stuff. I just saw you there a couple weeks ago, and I was there because Ace Frehley had his 70th birthday, and I'm
I
like,
know.
he called me up and he said, "Hey, buddy, I know it's a haul for you, but I'd love for you to come to the dinner." I said to my
That's
wife, "This
awesome.
is a guy I've known 35 years. He's going to be 70. I got to
I
do
know.
it."
I
And I
know.
did
Yeah.
it, and I'm glad I did. So whether it's personal stuff or whether it's just going to the show and seeing that band one more time, when you're dealing with guys like that, you're not being morbid. It's just realistic. You just don't know. You got to enjoy it while they're still with us.
I mean, the Ace Frehleys of the world. I mean, he's more vibrant today than I think he has been in years. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these guys, there's an energy that's going on in these older guys, and I'm like, wow, it's addictive to be around them. You're like, I hope I'm this alive and vibrant when I'm like. It's hard to imagine. I mean, honestly, to go 70 sounds crazy, but 50 sounded crazy, 40 sounded crazy. You know what I mean? So it's like we're all inevitably headed in that direction, and it's sort of like I just want to play music. I had a birthday and I was like, oh man, just kind of giggling to myself. Wow, I never thought I'd, be a grown up like this. And my friend said, just very quietly and very dryly, well, you're younger than Mick Jagger. And I was like, hey, you're right. I'll always be younger than Mick Jagger. And he is still on fire.
He is.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
is. And I'm 56 and I think about it all the time. But when I see guys like Sammy Hagar, Robin Zander, Glenn
Yeah.
Hughes,
Oh,
of course, Jagger, some Alice Cooper, when you
yeah.
see these people and how good they still are, the shape they're in, how great they still are on stage. I mean, you go to see Alice or you go to see Sammy or you go to see Glenn or Robin or any of these people, you don't like these are people who've been doing it 50 years or more for the most part. You don't leave any of those people's shows saying, man, that guy's got old. Like
Yeah,
you
no.
don't.
No, I know. It's like,
They're literally like because they're still so good and they take care of themselves and they're still so good at what they do. So I always believe I believe rock and roll keeps you young. And I
yes.
also believe that if there's never any need to stop as long as you can still do it at a great level.
Yes.
I think the questions of age creep in when people can't do it anymore, or they're not doing it real anymore, or it's a shell of what it once was. Then you're like, okay, stayed too long at the party, probably should have gone and done something else.
Sure.
But for the guys that are still out there, Steven Tyler, I mean,
I know.
insane at 73. It's insane.
It's nuts. Yeah.
So those are the guys that, to me, Todd, I don't know how you feel about it, but to me, it's inspirational because at 56, I'm like, hey, you can still be on your game. I'm not that far from 70.
No, and it's such a big difference between Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky. That's not a conversation. Those guys don't do that at 70 years old. But like you're saying, it's like to see Steven Tyler and Robin Zander and those guys still kicking ass. It's like I'm going to do that. To hell with it. I was doing Rock Vault here in Vegas with Howard Leese and guys like that, and I'm like, it was a really awesome experience to go like, yeah, I'm going to keep doing this when I'm 70 years old. And guys like Ringo Starr just turned 80. We never thought that was the thing. We're just like, what? That guy from the Beatles is 80 years old now, and he had dates. He had dates that were canceled. So you're like, there you go. It's possible. We'll
Yeah.
all have dates, and you'll be there doing the thing. Hey, you're Slash. Slash will look exactly the same, of course.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, he's my age, but still, he's given given the early wear he put on his tread, how he came out of it the other end is just ridiculous.
He is
God
the
bless him.
strongest dude I know. It's unbelievable. Yeah, and to be honest, he's in really great shape right now, and I'm like, I wish it would rub off of me. Like, I guess I should run or something. It's always like I should really get up and what's this show? And the next thing you know, I'm sucked into some show for. Do you want to watch the next episode? Of course, I'll watch the next episode. Anyway,
that's my problem down here at the beach. I run, but I run to the bagel shop to get breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. You undo all your running. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you hanging, and I love you, and I can't wait for you to be here so we can waste each other's time in the best way possible. Zach Throne, we'll all be all over there, Brent Fitz, and just kind of like listening to music. It'll be fun.
Yeah, the bootlegger, man. I
And
mean,
the bootlegger, yeah.
our buddy Ronnie Mancuso, the best.
Yeah.
And I love seeing all you guys. I love all you guys. I'm being sincere. I mean, people say to me all the time, what is it with Vegas with you? Because they think I go there and it's like drinking and partying and
Casinos,
and
gambling.
casinos and gambling and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And I'm like, no, I actually have like more like closer friends there now that I bond with than anywhere. And they're like, well, what do you do? And I'm like, I just like go to dinner and talk about rock music and just have fun. Like, it's just like I have so many friends there. And of course, you're one of my best ones. And I appreciate you having me on this. It's always fun talking to you, man. You know, we could, if there was tape in this machine, we'd run it out. So.
Well, that's the thing is you literally could pick anything like Randy Rhoads versus Eddie Van Halen and just do 2 hours on that. You know what I mean? Like, and you could find guys who are just as passionate about one guy and the other, right or wrong, because we all know Eddie Van Halen really is, the innovator. But I mean, those are the conversations we would have in parking lots in high school with, very passionate. Are you kidding me? Judas Priest versus Iron Maiden, whatever it is, they would just go on and on and on. And not that we're always like this versus this, but there's always sort of these conversations about, like you say, pulling the thread of whether it's UFO or any number of bands. And that's just, it's just, I always think it's interesting because a lot of people will just look at it like it's the craziest thing ever. And I'm like, dude, all the stats of your favorite sports team. Like I've never been that guy, but it's like the fact that you know all that information about the New York Yankees, but I know all the information about Kiss or Aerosmith or whatever. To me, it's very similar. It's borderline like Star Wars, Star Trek, nerddom, but it just happens to be about rock and roll. It's what we do.
I remember one night, I know you want to go, I'll tell you real quick. I remember one night we were at the Bootlegger and we went until like 3:30 or something. And you were there. I think you were there, Throne, Fitz, everybody were having a great time, Ronnie. And I got back to the hotel, like it was like 3:30. And I look and I'm like, it's 6:30 back at home. And my wife wakes up usually around 6 a.m. So I was like, I'll check in now. So I called. She's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm just getting back to the hotel. She's, what the hell did you do till 3:30 in the morning? I was like, hung out talking about Angel and Cheap Trick. Like, and now does somebody else like a normal person like that would have been like, yeah, sure you did. You
exactly.
Were at Rhino all night.
Yeah, exactly.
But she knows, no, we really did sit and play Blue Murder records. And,
Oh, God bless your wife.
Even when I'm not physically doing that with you guys, or you're not, or I'm not, we're there in spirit because
exactly.
No further proof needed than a couple weeks ago when you were texting me with Slash and the guys when you were all together, hanging out, and and one day Miles is texting me about Sykes, and one day Fitz is texting me about this, and then Slash texts me about Cheap Trick, and I'm like, we were all going together, even though we were all different places. It's just there's always, like I said, we find each other.
I know. It was like, and when we are together, we're watching like videos. Brent Fitz loves to play DJ, so suddenly it's like Dawkins videos or whatever, and we're all taking video of it and then sending it to you just to start this sort of. But we can't do this without sharing it with Ed. I mean, we got to talk about it with Ed.
Yeah. I appreciated that. It was fun. I was there through the beauty of texting. So
exactly.
Yeah.
But it didn't work like that back in the day. But anyway, have an awesome break there on the Jersey Shore. And,
thanks, man.
And I'm sure we'll text 100 times before I see you, but
For sure.
Tomorrow. Today was Sticky Fingers' 50th anniversary. There's always something to talk about. So
I know.
So we'll find something. Okay,
well,
man.
Thanks, man. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Always. Love you. Have fun.
Love you
Talk
too.
soon. Big love.
All right. Take care, brother.